recognize, or rather I understand, that what I'm about to say is not necessarily the most popular opinion right now. But I do know that there are people that agree with the topic, or what my positions are on this topic, as well as kind of where I'm at just in general with this subject matter. And that's of gaming, and when it comes to the accessibility thing. We've talked about this before. You can go to Young Rubber 59 Entertainment. You may be watching this video right here on Young Rubber 59 Entertainment. And I've talked about this idea that, to me, I believe that the quality of gaming, there's an element that I don't think a lot of people discuss right now. You know, the easy blame is, okay, well, look at microtransactions, greed, and all of these sorts of things. And I think there's a larger issue here. And that I don't want to say the customers, but yeah, I mean, sometimes there is some mixed market cues, let's say, that's being given to some of these companies. Because if you look at, when it comes to this topic, some of the games you're on the list and their positions on it, I think the waters are muddied. Now, gaming right now it's the thing. It's eclipsed Hollywood. It is the industry to be a part of if you're trying to make some money. You want a stable job because it's there and it continues to grow, and it's long beyond the days where only nerds played video games. Like, that's not even a thing anymore. Like, everybody plays video games for the most part now. This accessibility thing, and what I refer to that what I mean when I do refer to that, it's not like accessibility in the sense of, I think some people get it twisted, like talking about trying to have elements where folk like colorblind folk can adjust settings to make it easier. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about accessibility by literal definition. And that is that whether it be making games easy, whether it be trying to do too much, where games are trying to basically, they're being pulled in so many different directions because it's trying to appeal to the widest demographic, the biggest demographic, which means that you're finding less risks being taken because people are looking at it, and I don't know what data they are. Maybe the executives like, we can't do this, we can't have this game because it'll make it too niche. And well, how will little Johnny access it because it's too difficult for him or something like that? Now, let's go to the difficulty part of this and what I want to chime in on. Now, I grew up in an era where, and I'm not that old, by the way, I'm only 30, but I grew up in an era where there were stacks of games that we never beat. And if you own Super Nintendo, if you own like Sega Genesis, you know, you feel me on that. There were just games that we never beat, like simply never beat, as in they had an ending, but there was some that were just like, we just never beat. I talk about the techno clashes of the world. I've talked about Vector Man 2. I never beat that. And these are games that we just had stacks of them. And it was like, it wasn't a conversation where we were offended at that, right? Where it was like, okay, look at Battletoads or something like that, games that were supposed to be difficult, that sometimes you just never beat. Right. And sometimes that's part of it. It's fun. You get older, you get more mature. You want to try to beat it, and it's still kind of difficult, but you get it. But it wasn't offensive. Right. It wasn't like, OK, well, the developer's fault that we can't beat this. That never kind of crossed my mind. It never crossed the minds of people that I knew that were gamers. It was just, OK, hey, I got this big stack of Sega Genesis games that I never actually completed. And there was nothing wrong with that. It wasn't offensive. It wasn't offensive to be part of the groups or the demographic that never completed a game or never beat a game to its completion. Like, it wasn't offensive. Nowadays, because of, again, we live in this sort of accessibility era, that's offensive. That's offensive. You've seen games, you're on a list. Write so much about this. PC Gamer, for example, this is a what do you want to call them? A publication. And they wrote this article years ago and they reposted it. And it reminds me kind of what happened with the whole Demon's Soul remake, right? Where as to the games journalists were claiming that so many people wanted the easy mode on Demon's Souls. And obviously Dev said for himself, like, we're not doing it. The game's meant to be played in a particular way. And I think that's why those games, for examples, like Demon Souls of the world. Why, for one, they're so fucking good? It's because of just that. Reason being, a lot of people don't seem to understand that in order for a game, for example, with difficulty, like let's speak on single player games, for example. In order for a game to be able to scale like that, there has to be a lot of adjustment, right? Meaning that you cannot make a game unique in a sense, because you have to try to make it open enough to where, okay, it makes sense, where the difficulty is higher. Now, how that difficulty is done is different from game to game. Sometimes it's enemies take more damage. Sometimes it is you become more of a glass cannon and you take much damage, and they become you're no longer as spongy as what you once were. Sometimes it's multiplying the enemies. They all do it in different ways. But if they have to compensate for that on their base game, well, they have to sacrifice somewhere, and I don't think a lot of people understand that. Because, for example, with this article that we're talking about right here, and it's talking about a game that it says this charming RPG makes a case for a difficulty below easy. Now I read that and I read the title and I get pissed off. And just here it is. Like, this is what the person that wrote the article is saying. So I finished Thief, the Dark Project, on expert difficulty, just in case that's not that difficult of a game, by the way. Just in case you're already about to come at me with the get good nonsense. Again, that's not that difficult of a game, so I probably am still going to say that if you're making this case. But basically, they're going through this indie RPG, and this person is basically saying because of the way that it sets its difficulty, it's basically I guess what the case the person is making is that there should be difficulties lower than easy that are baked into all of these different games. Now, I, of course, disagree with that wholeheartedly. And some people come from it from the angle of, well, more options the better. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. Not necessarily more options equals better. Yes. Are there certain games that could pull it off better than others? Of course, but that should go without saying. But the idea that just because someone has more options means the game is better is horseshit. I understand. This is why y'all wonder why, if you hear my reviews, like when I talk about Cyberpunk and all these other games, you see my reviews and I always use the term I didn't play on games journalist mode, because that's what I consider this, because it's always these damn games journalists, because their jobs are more so they have to move on to the next game. So of course they will love it to where the game is short, sweet, and easy if they can get it, so they can fly through it, do their reviews and move the fuck on. But I think there's something that we lose sight of here when we talk about games in this context, and that's just what I was referring to before. And that is that more options don't equal better. Because again, you can argue maybe the way at normal setting is the way the game, quote unquote, is supposed to be played. But even so, in order to have an easier difficulty or a harder difficulty, there's something that is baked into that game that had to be made on scale, which means that it couldn't be what it was. If you wonder why the Demon Souls, for example, or Soul series in general, and those lack of kind of difficulty options are the way that they are, because the game is what it is. There are no adjustments. The adjustments, if anything, needs to be made on you. The game is what it is. If you can't beat it, if it's too difficult, it is what it is. But the game is fucking what it is. And when the developers are able to focus on just that, well, of course, the game can be better. Not saying that every game that doesn't have a difficulty setting is going to be good or great. No, it's not even close to what I'm saying. More so what I'm suggesting is that when we go into the next generation, we're talking about this on the pre-show. I'm looking through the damn PlayStation store. I'm like, damn, man, I have nothing to fucking play. Like, and by that, I don't mean that there are games that aren't that I can't play. I mean, there are no games from a next generation sense that are pushing the envelope, or rather pushing the boundaries, because everybody's playing it safe. And I think accessibility is part of that, because you think about it, and we've covered games that I say Reddit ruins real time, because you have that demographic of people who want the game, of course, to be like it is that they want it to, and often that is on, when it comes to difficulty, in the term that a lot of people like to use, grinding. And that is that, okay, I don't want to spend that much time on the game. The excuses that they have jobs and all these other stuff, as if not anybody else that plays games has a fucking job or anything, and they don't want to be able to have to get better at it. And I want to put something on your mind if that's of your approach, because unfortunately what's been conflated is easy, mindless equals fun. So I've seen, for example, you've seen me like at rage on certain games, and the reason it being is because I'm a competitor. I've been a competitor. I've been in sports, involved in sports my entire life, and I like to compete. But competition is fun to me, right? And it's fun for a lot of people. So the idea that there is some type of strife, there is some type of struggle, and there's a thought exercise with certain games where you have to learn like mechanics and all of that, timing elements, like what the Souls games do very, very well. Like, that's fun. That in itself is fun for a lot of us. What isn't fun for a lot of us is mindlessly going through one-punching enemies because I'm fucking overpowered. Like, that's not fun to me, and I'm not saying that it isn't for other people. But what I'm saying is that's the angle that I don't think a lot of people understand when it comes to looking at games in this day and age and thinking that accessibility or more accessibility means better games. And I think that's an aspect that, like I said, and that was a point of the segment, that I think people lose sight of. It's easy to blame the greed and the corporations and all these other stories. I get all that, and I'm not saying there's not truth to certain aspects of that. But I do think that companies are shooting for the lowest common denominator. And often that ruins the experience ruins the game for what it could be, because it's trying to target the most wide demographic. And often you get games, for example, like Marvel's Avengers, they get pulled in 17 different directions, which just make for a terrible fucking game all around, right? Because you're not sticking to anything. You're like, oh, well, I want everybody to be able to play it. Sometimes it's okay to be niche. Sometimes it's okay to be difficult. Sometimes it's okay for someone to have to pick up a game, and there are going to people that are going to be better and worse. I do believe that moving into like, I get it. Like, I understand like the whole experience narrative based games where you're kind of the cinematic movies is basically interactive movies. That's what I call them. A lot of games kind of tend to trend in those directions. Hell, if you look at some of the like that Xbox right before the Xbox came out, and they had whatever the Xbox Series X came out, and they were talking about what was to come, and like half the damn games were basically interactive movies where the game's holding your hand the entire fucking time, and that's what, I get that some people are interested in that, but I think some folks are losing sight of not only those that don't prefer that, but more importantly, how that can actually ruin a game. Because, yeah, I cuss a lot and I rage a lot when I'm playing games. Generally, those games are like competitive online games. But if I get beat by someone that's actually better, you're not going to hear from me. Now, if I lose to some bullshit to cheese mechanic, or because of the fact that someone paid to win, yeah, like those types of aspects kind of piss me off. But you get what it is that I'm saying, that it's nothing to me to go through a game and not be able to be the best. It's nothing for me to go through a game in which there's something, for example, like in an MMO setting or an online RPG setting, where there's certain aspects that are simply not accessible to me because I'm not good enough. That's not offensive to me. Those are not offensive. That's not offensive to me. That's not like, I'm not going to get upset at that. I may get frustrated, but not like to the point to where, okay, this game has a problem because I can't access that portion because I'm not good enough to beat that level and get that gear or something like that. That doesn't offend me. And there was a point in time from a gamer's perspective where that was the norm, but now it's not. So this is what I would suggest doing. And I just want to put that tidbit out there and put that on your mind. When we talk about the stale games or the idea, definitely when it comes to AAA titles, I think we have to also take into consideration the accessibility element, in which you have a lot of companies and a lot of developers, or rather, and again, where they're getting that data from in terms of, I don't know, but where accessibility is ruining gaming experiences more so, and it's people are shying away from, let's say, taking like risk, let's say, when it comes to some of these games that we're not getting the envelope pushed because they always want to fucking play it safe.